when I talk about improving communication, right, when you think about when we are mindful and self-aware, we're better able to communicate with our kids in a calm, empathetic, and responsive manner. And so what that sometimes looks like is that when our child, especially our toddlers, we're in the throes of toddler parenting, when our child is like in their emotions and they're highly emotional, we can calm ourselves down, we can step away from the situation, and then we can appear in the manner that we are best able to communicate with them, and we can be empathetic and responsive. For me, I think this actually is a great way to reduce the amount of conflict and misunderstandings and improve our positive interactions. Because what we tend to do as parents is in the moment, in the heat of the moment, when our child is activated and our child is throwing a tantrum, we want to solve it right then. But we ourselves are activated. We ourselves are throwing an adult tantrum, and that is not the time. So when we practice mindfulness, we are aware of what's happening in our body. We can notice we're getting angry. We can notice we're getting frustrated, and we can give ourselves pause to take care of our flooded emotions and then come and interact with our kids. Hi, and welcome to the Stethoscopes to Swaddles podcast, episode 112. So today on the podcast, I am talking about something that has become mainstream, which is mindfulness. And I want to talk about it from the context of parenting. The reason I've been thinking about this is because in the Smart Mama Club, we are working on self-compassion. And one of the tenets of self-compassion is mindfulness versus self-identification. Hey mama, you deserve a life free of overwhelm and burnout. Welcome to the Stethoscopes to Swaddles podcast. I'm your host, life and mindset coach, Shiro Bergbauer. I'm also a wife, mom, and CRNA. This is the podcast for high-achieving mamas in medicine like you and I. Together, we'll learn how to navigate the ups and downs of working motherhood. If you're looking to thrive in your relationships and overcome overwhelm in your motherhood, marriage, and medicine, you're in the right place. Welcome to the Stethoscopes to Swaddles podcast. One of the things about self-compassion is, from the research on self-compassion, there has been this idea of identifying the things that predict, our self-compassion and the things that predict our mindfulness. And when we think about things like self-criticism or not being kind to yourself, that is obviously a way to decrease your self-compassion. And so one of the things that the research shows is that if we practice mindfulness interventions, we can reduce self-criticism. And so I wanted to share just what, mindfulness as a parent looks like, work that I myself continue to do in my own parenting journey, and that I want to bring to your attention. And also, how does that look like? What are some of the stressors that we face, and how can we be more aware and mindful in our parenting? So one of the things I wanted to talk about first is, what is mindfulness, right? And what is self-awareness? And mindfulness is just the idea of noticing what is in the here and now, what is happening in front of us, what is working, what is important to us, and what are we present for? And I think sometimes when the topic of mindfulness comes up, it can be difficult for parents because we already are balancing so many things in our lives. We're already trying to do a lot of things. And so here comes another person saying, mindfulness is important. And I just wanted to simplify it for you so that it doesn't feel like work. It doesn't feel like another thing that you have to add to your to-do list. And so one of the things to notice about mindfulness, it doesn't really necessarily have to be meditation, obviously. I mean, meditation's a great part of mindfulness, but that's not it. It's not the only thing that we could practice in mindfulness. And when we think about self-compassion and being present in the here and now, I think we have to realize that we can learn to identify what is, we can learn to identify what's working. And so I wanted to use the definition that Kristin Neff offers on mindfulness in her book, Self-Compassion. And she says, mindfulness refers to the clear seeing and non-judgmental acceptance of what's occurring in the present moment. facing up to reality, in other words, so that, we just need to see things as they are, no more, no less, in order to respond to our current situation in the most compassionate and therefore effective manner. So that means that we stop and we notice like moments of struggle, moments of suffering, because in order for us to give ourselves compassion, we have to identify the times that we are struggling, because we really can't like begin to find ourselves if we're not acknowledging what's happening. So what happens, especially in parenting, is we often fail to recognize when we feel guilt or sad or lonely. And so those are moments that we could be responding to ourselves with compassion, but if we're not acknowledging that they exist, then we are not even capable of accessing compassion. So recently I talked about on Facebook, I was sharing a post because I had gone to volunteer at my daughter's school, and our school has multiple opportunities to volunteer. And fortunately for me, I have, my job has been more flexible the past year and a half in terms of being able to ask for time to go to volunteer at the school. And of course, that comes with, losing income for the day, because I'm self-employed now as a CRNA. And so if I don't go to work, I don't get paid. I don't have vacation days. But I digress. So I went to my daughter's school, and there were 8 parents that could volunteer, because we were taking the kids for a international festival at a different campus across the street. And so they needed chaperones to walk these kids. And so when we got there, one of the little girls was like, "Oh, I want my mommy." And I had this moment when I felt so much compassion for the little girl, but I felt so much empathy for her mommy. And the reason I felt that way is because I know there have been moments when I couldn't go. There have been moments when I literally couldn't make it. Even if I was available, there were already enough volunteers. And so I had this conversation with my daughter that evening. And I said, Bella, I just want you to know that when there are chances to be at your school, and I absolutely cannot make it, I want you to know that even in those moments, I'm still thinking about you. And even in those moments, I tried my best. And in many ways, it felt like also acknowledging the struggle of this little girl's mom who couldn't make it. And so fast forward to yesterday or 2 days ago, I was on a Facebook group, and this mom had posted, it's the weekend before Mother's Day, and she had posted that, their school had muffins with moms, and the teacher had said, she's going to be so sad you can't be there. It really got me thinking about how, like, as a working parent, we just can't win sometimes, right? Like, you want to be there, you want to attend. And the post was filled with so many other moms saying, I specifically requested the Friday before Mother's Day off, and then they changed the event, or, oh, they postponed it to another day, and my flexibility doesn't allow me to. And so I think when we are bombarded with, oh, here's how you're not even measuring up as a mom, it can be so difficult to then be like, oh, now I got to be mindful. I have to be aware of what's happening in the present moment. But I want you to recognize in those moments when you can't be there, you really cannot be there. And the guilt that comes with it, part of mindfulness is practicing awareness and being like, yeah, this is a hard moment. This is like a really difficult time to not be able to make it to my kid's event. And acknowledging that and noticing that for yourself. So that can be just a way to pause and be mindful, is to give yourself compassion in a moment of suffering, in a moment of difficulty, where you can say, hey, I feel like I'm falling short. My mind is focusing on how I have failed as a mom. But what if I showed up in compassion for myself, and knowing that this is not a personal inadequacy, right? This is something I just can't make it. And so I can't completely blame myself and feel terrible that I'm not going to be physically present with my child at school, or, do the thing. And instead, look into the times that you can be present at home, or, engaging with your children, and focusing on that possibility instead of what's impossible. Because when we fail to acknowledge that, yeah, there are times when mom guilt will get the best of you. And the reality is sometimes it's actually us shaming ourselves, like we're falling short, and saying, okay, this is going to be hard, but I am acknowledging that it's happening. I'm acknowledging the existence of this suffering or this struggle, and I want it to matter to me that I acknowledge that. And I'm not talking about like acknowledging that it's happening and like staying steeped into it and catharsis. I'm just offering us the idea of like realizing that it's happening and also being aware that it happens to other parents, it happens to other moms, and be kind to ourselves. What is the impact of, and why should we even be considering practicing mindfulness? Right. So we've talked about just that mindfulness and self-awareness. So how does that improve our parenting? When we can be mindful and self-aware, we can be more present with our children. We can be able to give them the quality time that they crave, and the quality time that we too crave. And we can then manage our stress, and we can also communicate more effectively with our kids and our partners when we are being mindful, right? So when we are present and fully engaged in the current moment, right, we are paying attention to what we're thinking, what we're feeling in our body without judging ourselves, without distracting ourselves. And when we are self-aware and we're recognizing and acknowledging our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, right, we are paying more attention to our strengths. We are working on our weaknesses, and we are aware of our triggers and how they impact the way we interact with other people, including our kids. So it's such an effective way of parenting because we are more present, right? We are obviously less stressed, and we are communicating more effectively. We're sharing our struggle, and we are seeing our children for what they are. So some of the benefits of mindfulness and self-awareness is that when we are, showing up in our relationship like that, then our children are able to develop emotional resilience. And if, you just notice that, you're not being fully present in your parenting, I don't want you to use this podcast against yourself. I want you to just think about ways in which you can start like finding those micro moments of connection and practicing self-awareness so that you can improve your parenting. You can, improve how you're communicating. When I talk about improving communication, right, when you think about when we are mindful and self-aware, we're better able to communicate with our kids in a calm, empathetic, and responsive manner. And so what that sometimes looks like is that when our child, especially our toddlers, we're in the throes of toddler parenting, when our child is like in their emotions and they're highly emotional, we can calm ourselves down, we can step away from the situation, and then we can appear in the manner that we are best able to communicate with them, and we can be empathetic and responsive. For me, I think this actually is a great way to like reduce the amount of conflict and misunderstandings and improve our positive interactions. Because what we tend to do as parents is in the moment, in the heat of the moment, when our child is, activated and our child is throwing a tantrum, we want to solve it right then. But we ourselves are activated. We ourselves are throwing an adult tantrum, and that is not the time. So when we practice mindfulness, we are aware of what's happening in our body. We can notice we're getting angry. We can notice we're getting frustrated, and we can give ourselves pause to like take care of our flooded emotions and then come and interact with our kids. Now, you obviously have to make sure that they're safe, but you don't always run to solve the problem right here and now, because when you're mindful, you're like, I'm not in the right mental state to solve a problem right now. I'm going to maybe defer to my partner, or I'm going to just like make sure the kid's safe, step away for a little bit, and then come back and interact with them. So the other thing is like when we think about the stress levels of parenting, right? So parenting itself is a stressor. And when we can maybe work on ways to reduce our own stress and also show our children, healthy coping mechanisms for, managing stress, we can maybe notice that the overall environment in the home is more harmonious. We can notice that our children are better aware of their own stress. They're better aware of their own frustrations. So I'll give you an example of something that happened in my home today that was a moment in awareness of like, this is stressful for everybody. So I had an important phone call on Zoom, and at the very same time, my daughter had decided that she was going to watch Bluey at the same time, play a game, and like she was doing 5,000 things at the same time. And I had asked my husband, I was like, hey, I have this important phone call. Please make sure she's not in the vicinity of my office. I gotta answer this call. Of course, 5 minutes before my phone call, my daughter is screaming at the top of her voice because she can't find her doll. My husband's like getting flustered because he needs to get her out of there. And I'm getting like really wound up. And what I ended up doing is I just told myself that I'm just gonna like let him handle the behavior right now because I'm like already activated. I have to take these 5 minutes before my call to calm myself down. And so in that mindful moment, did I decrease the amount of stressor that was happening in my household? I didn't. But what I was able to do is tune into my body, bring myself back to baseline, and then be able to, be on my phone call. So sometimes when we talk about stress reduction, we're not like, oh, it's just like, unicorns and daisies. It's not always that. It's sometimes creating little moments of micro connection with yourself so that you can show up in your parenting better. The third thing I want to talk about is like when we are mindful and self-aware, we're better able to make decisions that are in line with our values and beliefs, right? So many times when we are not present and aware, we tend to be in behaviors that are not reflective of who we truly are. We might be yelling at our children. We might even defer to spanking, which we don't do, right? Like we might find ourselves like not really showing up and attuning to the needs of our children. So when we are mindful and self-aware, we can make better decisions. We can have a more, conscious parenting style. We can be able to identify how we can apply this mindfulness and self-awareness to so many other areas of our lives, right? Because we can apply mindfulness and awareness in, parenting situations like discipline, right? Solving conflict between siblings, managing emotions in ourselves, and also helping our children navigate their emotional landscape. For example, when a child is deeply activated and we ourselves have started to practice mindfulness exercises such as deep breathing, right? We can help them through that. We can help them maybe take deep breaths. We can, instead of saying, you're on timeout, we can practice time in where we connect with them and we help them self-soothe. The other thing is like when we are maybe solving sibling conflicts or conflicts with our own children, when we are practicing self-awareness, we can identify our own triggers. We can identify our own biases before we try to solve the problem. And that way we can empathize with our child's perspective. So when we are using these techniques, right, we can parent differently in a way that creates positive outcomes. So what are some things that get in the way of us practicing mindfulness and self-awareness? I think it's important to talk about this because these are common, and I don't want you to be like, oh my God, I haven't been doing any of this. Something's really wrong with me, right? I want you to notice like the things that get in the way. What are the things that are in the way between us and accomplishing this goal? So first one is lack of time, right? We are in a society where we don't get a lot of parental support, right? So we are busy with work and taking care of the household and responsibilities. And so we might not have adequate time for self-care and self-reflection. What I want you to just be aware that it doesn't have to be large pockets of time. It could be a few minutes of just mindful practice right before you get out of bed in the morning or right before you go to sleep at night. So that can be just a way of overcoming that time barrier by just like making it a small micro moment. And second one is difficulty focusing, right? It's so hard for us as parents to be in the present moment. We're thinking about the groceries, the laundry, the housekeeping, and all the things that need to be done. So we might find ourselves so caught up in worrying about the future or stressing out about the past. And so what we can do when we're practicing mindfulness is that we can bring ourselves back to the present and focus on what's happening right now. So when you're finding yourself having a hard time focusing, allow yourself just a couple of moments of reconnection with yourself and showing up in the present moment. The third one is, this is so common, is judgment and self-criticism. When we practice, mindfulness and self-awareness, we have to be very conscious that when we judge ourselves and when we criticize ourselves, it gets in the way of us being mindful. So when we are noticing self-criticism and negative self-talk, we can just like show up in compassion for ourselves. Think about how you would talk to your kids. Think about how you would talk to a friend with love instead of judging and criticizing yourself. So this month in the Smart Mama Club, we are digging deep into self-compassion. And one of the things that is so important for all of us to understand is that when we show up in judgment and self-criticism, nothing has gone wrong. Many of us have been programmed like that. Many of us have been trained that the only way we move forward in life is being hard on ourselves, and the only way we can be like achieving our goals is being this drill sergeant and like really unkind to ourselves. And if we show up in kindness, we might slack off. And so this is something that has been programmed in many of us, and so it's unlearning that and realizing that we don't have to be so unkind to ourselves. We can treat ourselves the way we treat the people we love, and we are deserving of that love and attention. Number 4 barrier can be resistance from the kids, right? The kids that we're trying to be mindful and aware about, they may not always be receptive to our attempts at mindfulness practice, especially when they're younger or they're just not used to the idea of mindfulness. So it's important that you show up with patience and understanding, as all things parenting, and you find ways to integrate mindfulness into the daily activities in a way that works for your entire family. So in our family, one of the things that we do is at the end of the day, we just we have this emotions wheel and we talk about today I felt this emotion, and we just explore that. And my daughter sometimes will say, today I felt sad, today I felt surprised, and we also try to communicate that with her. I'll tell her, today I felt sad, I didn't get what I wanted, or today I felt frustrated because things weren't working out, or today I felt happy because I got to see a patient that I took care of and they had a great outcome. So just kind of those little micro connection moments can be so important in just raising awareness of emotional landscape for our kids. And when I think about how do we even try to teach a toddler mindfulness, one of the things that I have learned is speaking a language they understand, speaking a language that makes sense to them, right? So we're not going to be oh, we're going to be in the present moment. We can just be what do you see right now? So one of the things that I learned as far as practicing mindfulness with my toddler is being able to maybe name 5 things that you see, or 5 things that you smell, 5 things that you hear, and bringing that awareness into the here now. I will link a book in the show notes for little kids, and it's called Now Maps. Now Maps. I think there's a junior one and there's a teenage one. It's written by one of my favorite humans. He doesn't even know he's one of my favorite humans, Dr. Daniel Siegel. And he is, he's done a lot of work on, developmental awareness and raising kids. And this book really just gives children an awareness of what is happening in their brain when they're feeling certain emotions. So in the toddler one, I believe they cover sadness, they cover anger and surprise. And the way the book is built out, the kid gets to pick an adventure and they go on it. And so in this book, what they do is they give you a flashlight. And so you shine the light, and then there's a meter, and it's called the OK meter. And it could be either red and I believe green or yellow. And those different stages represent their emotional experience at the time. And then they can be able to notice how they're feeling in their body and if it's not working and how they can navigate that. So that is such a great book for teaching kids mindfulness and being in the present moment. So how do we overcome all these obstacles? I've talked about the obstacles. Number 1 is just scheduling small pockets of time for practicing mindfulness, right? When we have these busy schedules and now we are adding one more thing, I just want you to think about just 5 minutes. Just find 5 minutes in your day, in your morning routine, and maybe after the kids have gone to bed, or, right before you do the dishes after dinner, give yourself little pockets of time. Number 2 is setting reminders. So you can just nowadays, even on the Apple Watch, those of you who have Apple Watches, I'm not sure if the Androids have the same settings, but you can have little reminders, and the Apple Watch will remind you take a moment to take a deep breath. It's just a little micro pocket time to just be in the present moment that can be so rewarding in the long term. And the third one is incorporating mindfulness into your daily activities, right? So it could be practicing mindful breathing when you are doing the dishes, or practicing a body scan when you're taking a walk with your kids, right? You're just trying to integrate mindfulness in your daily life. Number 4 is practicing self-compassion, right? We can recognize that practicing mindfulness and self-awareness is a journey, and there might be some days that are heavier than others. And so being gentle with yourself can help you overcome guilt and frustration that you're oh my God, I started this practice, I'm not doing it. Just be kind to yourself. It's not supposed to be perfect, right? It's literally just keep giving it a shot, keep making it part of your, life experience. Number 5 is seeking support, right? You can join a mindfulness group, or you can find a coach or a therapist that can provide this support and accountability for you so you can maintain a mindfulness practice. And connecting with other parents who are also practicing mindfulness so you can share your experiences and you can give each other support. So what are some techniques that we can use to practice mindfulness and self-awareness? Number 1, which is the most obvious one, is meditation, right? So meditation is the practice of sitting in a quiet place and focusing on the present moment. And it can be so easy. You could just sit down, find a comfortable place. You can even lie down and close your eyes and just focus on your breath. Notice how your body is working for you even when you're not aware. So you're breathing, just tune into your breathing. Notice your natural breath, right? Allow your thoughts to just come and go without judging them. And when you notice that your mind is starting to like drift away, just gently bring it back with breathing. Number 2 is deep breathing. My favorite breathing exercise is square breathing. And that is like, I just think about it as a square. You inhale for 4, you hold it for 4, you exhale for 4, you hold it for 4. And when you're doing this, it can help you really calm your mind because you're really focusing on your breathing. It's kind of hard to focus on your breathing and also be thinking a million other things. So focus on the sensation of like your lungs getting filled with air and air leaving your body. Number 3, which is a practice I have started incorporating with my one-on-one clients, is body scanning. So it just involves like focusing your attention on each part of your body from toes to head or head to toe and noticing any sensations, tension, or discomfort. So you sit down comfortably, right? And you close your eyes and you just start bringing your attention to your toes. You wiggle your toes because we don't even sometimes notice that we have toes, unfortunately, right? So wiggling your toes and moving up your body, noticing any sensations that may come and feelings as you go by. I recently was on a coaching call with a client and we were talking about anxiety, and she has really struggled with anxiety. And she was telling me how, like, from our work together, even when she feels anxiety now, when she feels it coming up, she's way more aware of it and she's more compassionate towards herself when it's rising in her body. She just notices that it's there and she doesn't make it mean anything about her. She's just like, oh, I'm noticing I'm feeling anxious. And then it's not as overwhelming for her. So body scanning can be a great way, especially for people who like struggle with like focusing and paying attention. Just like closing your eyes, notice your toes, wiggle your toes. My favorite one is like when you get to the face and you can just like notice any tension in your face and you can fake a yawn or fake a smile. And it just helps you to realize like where are the areas in your body that you're holding tension? Where are some sensations that you haven't tuned into and you've been walking around with these sensations and not realizing how they impact your overall well-being? Number 5 is mindful listening. So this can be like you choose a sound like a bell or a chime and you just listen to the sound with your full attention. You notice the sound as it begins and you notice the sound as it starts to fade away. And you can also like practice mindful listening with your kids by like you put your phone down, right? And you just pay attention to them talking. And when they speak to you, like without being distracted, it can literally be 5 minutes. Tune into what they're saying. Tune into how they're experiencing life. I'll tell you a funny thing that happened recently. So my daughter was telling me, hey, mama, today is the last day of the airplane station. I have no idea what this airplane station was. We hadn't talked about it. And she basically told me that in their class, she's in pre-K 4, in their class, they had this like airplane, or I guess it's like built to look like an airplane. And 4 kids go on the airplane one at a time. And so one person gets to be the pilot and everybody else gets to be the passenger. And she's telling me this story and I'm so fascinated at her capacity to like process what's happening on this quote unquote plane. And she goes, yeah, and then we landed in Mexico City. And I was like, oh, what was happening in Mexico City? She was like, well, I went to meet my friend Jaden. And I was like, oh, who's Jaden? She's like, oh, it's my friend that goes to Mexico City school. And so we started talking about that. And I was so fascinated by this whole like imaginative play, because then she started telling me a story about how Jaden fell off a tree. And like, I just knew it was her brain working. But it was such a good moment of connection for us because I was like, wow, like she really has a creative imagination. Another one that happened was we recently had a thunderstorm and I asked her, do you want to go listen to thunder? And she actually, my husband and I have talked about like how she's not afraid of thunder because he's taught her when like you count, if you see the lightning, you count and then the thunder is going to come. So you're not afraid. And we just had this like moment of connection where we were both like being so aware in the present moment. We literally got lost in like watching the storm and we were like watching the rain come down. And it was like literally probably 2 minutes, but I just held on to that moment so much because it felt like I was so connected to her in that moment. And we didn't have to do anything elaborate. It was just a sweet moment of connection. So find these little pockets of time with your children. Find little micro connection moments. It could be going on a walk and, pay attention to how little kids literally notice the most like intricate, like little details. So I noticed that with my daughter. She'll like notice a ladybug that I hadn't seen. And her awareness is like so, that childlike mindfulness is so beautiful because it forces me to be like, what is happening in the environment around me? I'm just not walking, like not paying attention. I'm like, oh, look at these beautiful flowers. Look at these insects. Like she'll notice like ants and like little snails. And I'm like, how do you even notice that? But it's because her brain hasn't obviously been occupied by a million thoughts and a million things that are happening. She's more attuned to what's happening around her. This can be such a way of like just tuning into the present moment without making it like, this big elaborate thing. So what I want you to take away from this podcast is that we can stay present. We can stay present by like tuning in to our child's needs and their emotions. But we first have to be able to practice that moment of awareness and mindfulness versus like self-identifying with what's happening right now. So some of the ways we can also pay attention to our kids by being mindful, like I said, practicing active listening, right? When they're speaking, giving them our undivided attention, making eye contact, right? And not jumping in and completing the sentences for them. I'm guilty of that, where I'm like, okay, this needs to like wrap up, right? Just like noticing it, paying attention to their body language, because it can provide us with clues of what's going on in their internal world, right? If they're slouching, they might be tired. If they are like arms crossed, they might be angry. So being able to like notice what's happening and practicing attunement to their needs can be such a great way to connect with them. Showing empathy, right? When we try to understand their perspective and feelings, we can acknowledge their feelings and we can offer them comfort and support. We can also take time for one-on-one interactions. Again, these don't have to be large pockets of time. It could be 10, 15 minutes. I had a client who told me how it impacted her parenting so significantly when we worked on just like taking 15 minutes, putting the phone down and being one-on-one present with her son. And she noticed that he would like look forward to those moments. And once like kids like don't have that great of an attention span. Once the 15 minutes was over, if she like turned around and started doing something or got on the phone, her son didn't throw a fit because he had gotten that like nourishment back like from his mom. One-on-one interactions are like important, and we don't have to make them these dramatic things. They can just be little pockets of time. Number 5 is practicing patience, right? We all acknowledge that parenting can be so challenging, but we also should be aware that our kids need time to process what's happening in their emotional world. And sometimes they need time to also communicate what they need. And the way they communicate might not always be fun for us. And so being patient with them, noticing what's happening in their brain and being conscious to like support that instead of showing up in judgment or feeling that they should just hurry on up and be done with whatever emotion they're experiencing. And last but not least is being present in the moment, right? Focus on the present moment and try to let go of distractions or worrying about the past and the future. We can be more attuned to our children's needs when we are being here in the present moment. So I know these were like quite a bit, but I just want you to like maybe take one and pay attention to how you are demonstrating that and decide that this is the one thing you want to practice this week. So it could be practicing active listening for 5 minutes a day. Like give your children the attention that they are asking for those 5 minutes. Listen to what's happening in their internal world. I know amidst the dishes and the laundry and the cooking and all the things, it sounds like a lot, but 5 minutes in the grand scheme of things can be so beneficial, right? I always try to remember Pareto's rule, like the 80-20 principle, which is 80% of the results come from 20% of the work. So if we can commit to showing up and showing up in parental presence, that 20% of the time, we can yield such amazing results in our parenting journey. So I hope this episode was helpful for you. I'm like also in the throes of it, like doing the work. And I just wanted to kind of give you some, tips to practice mindfulness in your parenting and showing up for yourself in the same way, like practicing mindfulness, paying attention to when you are showing up in self-criticism and judgment and deciding like, what is the inverse of this thought I'm having about myself? Like, oh, I'm not a good mom. What is the inverse of that thought? It could be, I'm a mom who tries her best to show up when I can't, right? It could be, I'm a mom who gives the best that's available here and now. Listen, working parenthood is hard. It is hard, and I acknowledge the hard. And I want you to know that no matter what, you're doing such a great job. right? If you are struggling with the thought like, I'm not a good mom, that is a great sign that you are a good mom. Because guess what? People who aren't good moms aren't thinking about being good moms. So I just want to offer you that, like, show up in self-kindness, show up in self-compassion in a way that is reflective of the person that you deserve to be. Because you're amazing. You're a great human being. And you don't have to hustle for your worth as a parent because you already are worthy. So please, 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 please just commit to like one little thing as far as mindfulness, even if it's just for yourself. Take 5 minutes, take deep breaths, just show up for yourself. You deserve it. You deserve to be in the here and now for little pockets of time. So I hope this episode was helpful to you, and I will talk to you next week. Bye now. I'm Shira Bergbauer, and you've been listening to the Stethoscopes to Swaddles podcast. New episodes are out every Monday. These episodes are created by me, Shira Bergbauer, and produced by Cassidy Mitchell. If you enjoyed this show or found it helpful, please rate it and review us on Apple Podcasts. If the concepts I share on this podcast resonate with you, or you're ready to change your relationships and mindset, I can help you. If you'd like in-depth, personalized support, I'd love to invite you to apply for my Life and Mindset coaching program. Just imagine you and I every week working together as I teach you the tools to up-level your life. To book your free 1-hour consultation call, go to www.stethoscopestoswaddles.com/consultation. You're doing a great job, Mama. Have a great week. Bye now.